Welcome to the AI Impact for Nonprofits. Yes, I'm so glad you are here because this is going to be an impactful hour. And I thank you for your time, for being here. This 1 hour, you set aside time to learn and to grow and to also share about your nonprofit, how you're using AI to make an impact. And if you haven't started, yeah, I would like to know to see, get a pulse of the room where you are with AI. Put something in the chat. Are you scared? Are you using it? Are you just starting? Have you been using it? I've seen people, when I say people, I'm talking about nonprofits, like really been cranking out some good things for AI. And that's why we're having the AI Impact Hour to share with you somebody from your community who is using AI to make an impact in their community. I mean, it really is making a difference. It's really helping us move faster and make a difference. So today, I'm excited that we have somebody from the community. He's going to be joining us soon. And I see some people say we're just getting started or we haven't started. We didn't start with AI, planning to start implementing Microsoft AI this summer. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So come on up, Joe. Come on up. And you can go ahead and start sharing your screen. Yale Chung says, excited for the future. I'm excited about that too. So I appreciate you for putting that in the chat. And we have Mr. Joe Robbins here. He's the Chief Product Officer from Food Rescue US. Guys, everybody has to eat, right? So this is so important. So when I saw Joe, I was like, yes, you got to be a panelist. And I know you saw in the registration inviting you to be a panelist. We would love throughout today, this next hour, if you have something that you want to share, please use the raise your hand option. I'll bring you on camera. Make sure your camera ready, with your lipsticks, ladies, or whatever you want to do. Make sure your camera ready. And I'm going to turn this over to Joe. He's going to share how they have been using AI impact. First, a little about the organization, how they use AI to make an impact in their community. And then we're going to open up to you. Put your questions in the chat for Joe, and I'll see you at the end. Joe, take it away. And thank you so much for being here. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Aretha, and thanks everyone else for having me. Thanks for TechSoup for putting these on. I'm Joe Robbins. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Food Rescue US. Our mission is pretty simple to explain and a lot harder to execute. Okay, so we feed our communities and we protect our planet at the same time. Today, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about how we do that, and then get into how we've been integrating AI into our work. And I've kind of split that into two different sections. So we're going to talk about how we've introduced AI into our processes and our workflows at the organizational level, and then two, how we've integrated it into our technological offering. So hopefully there will be a little something for everybody in here. And at that, I'll just go ahead and get started. Food Rescue US is a national nonprofit focused on two problems that are more connected than most people realize, I think. Climate change and food insecurity. Every year in the US, enormous amounts of food, perfectly good food, gets thrown away. It goes and sits in landfills while millions of people don't have enough food. So Food Rescue US sits right in the middle of that gap. We solve this problem through a model that's direct and efficient. We connect food donors, so businesses that have surplus food, to volunteers who pick that food up and deliver it straight to social service agencies in their local communities. So we act as the decentralized distribution layer between the agencies that are getting that food out and the businesses that have the surplus. That's the complicated way of saying it. I like to tell people we're kind of like Uber Eats, but for food donations. Maybe don't tell Uber I'm describing it like that, but that's a good model for how we work. So this is kind of how the three pieces of the model fit together. We have food donors, and those can be restaurants, bakeries, grocery stores, schools, farmers markets. We're picking up from a hospital. On the other side, we have what we call receiving agencies, and these are food pantries, shelters, community kitchens, meal programs, and everything in between. And in the middle, connecting those two groups in real time, are our volunteer rescuers. So what makes this work at scale is that the transfer is direct, point A to point B. The food goes from the donor to the agency in a single trip. That keeps the food fresh. It keeps it safe to eat. It keeps our overhead really low, and it keeps volunteers engaged so they can see the impact of their work immediately. This model is incredibly efficient. For every dollar we spend, we deliver about 20 meals to folks who need it. So super efficient. and super scalable. The engine behind all of this is our software platform. So it makes the model sustainable. We can repeat this in different locations throughout the country. For our site directors who manage the local operations, it's a coordination tool. So they use it to manage, some of them, thousands of rescues a month. For volunteers, it's really simple. They open the app, they see what pickups are available near them, they sign up, and then they go. That's it. We've put a lot of work into making sure the technology stays out of the way and just makes it easier to do this work and to do good in the community. And that design philosophy is going to come up again when I get to the AI section here. But first, I got to talk about the results. So the impact kind of speaks for itself. We've been doing this since 2011, and we've rescued more than 250 million pounds of food. We have over 40,000 volunteers across this network. You can see we have about 50 sites in 27 different states across the country. And every month we have about 12,000 rescues. We did 150,000 in 2025. So that's the foundation. It's a huge amount of work. And now I'm going to start talking about kind of how AI fits into all of that. So first and foremost, I want to be honest about the context we're operating in because I think it's going to be relatable to a lot of the folks in this room. On the national side, we have 11 full-time staff, so that's it. We're fully grant funded, which means there's no budget for let's hire someone to handle that. Everyone wears multiple hats, including me, and I'll be straightforward with you. Integrating AI is not effortless. It's not plug and play. There's a real learning curve. Building better processes takes time, and we're still definitely in the middle of that. So we're learning alongside y'all. But for us, the direction has been really clear, and the investment has already been worth it for us. So on the local side, it's a different challenge. Our site directors, who are the folks who run these local operations, many of them started as volunteers, many of them still are. And the ones that are stipended through grants, so they're getting paid, but it's a lot of work for the money they're getting. So for larger markets, a site director might be managing hundreds of pickups every week. So it's a huge job. We're asking a lot of them. And here's the tricky part about all of this, that logistics is not the most important work that they do, not by a long shot. The most important thing that the site director does is building relationships with their stakeholders. So with donors, with the volunteers, with the agencies, that's irreplaceable. And so our design philosophy with the app has always been, how do we automate and take the logistics pieces of that role off their plates as much as possible so that they're freed up to focus on the parts of their job that only a human can do, right? And so AI is now going to be a big part of that answer. So I'm going to go on to the AI readiness piece of this, and talk about kind of what we've done at the organizational level. We started out by kind of researching what tools are out there, and which one of them fit most neatly with our processes. Myself and my lead developer, we've been using AI tools for 2 or 3 years between us. And so we kind of did an evaluation. We landed on Claude as our primary AI platform. It was the one that fit what we wanted to do the best. And the tooling was honestly the easiest part of this process for us. So the much harder part was figuring out how to actually integrate it into real, like practical workflows. Our product team, that's the team I run, we do a little bit of everything. So we do feature discovery, we design the features, we collect user feedback, we code the changes, we actually build the software ourselves, and we actually market the product as well. So we're doing a lot of different things. And so what we did was we built out dedicated projects inside Claude for each of these functions. We had manually curated context that we worked on as a team and then put into each of these projects to make sure that each session starts with the same kind of shared knowledge base. We use Claude Cowork to automate some of the recurring tasks. And we also built a process for sharing sessions between different employees when there's a handoff is needed, between folks. So those were all things that some of them we planned for in the beginning, some of them we learned once we got into it that we needed to have a plan for that. And one thing that was really exciting for me was Claude Code. So our developers use this tool, but I also personally use it. I do all of the data analytics for the organization. And so I can now query our database schemas. I can dig into design decisions that were made, years before I started here. Um, and I can get real answers without spending, precious developer time on those questions. So for a team the size of ours, that's a huge unlock for us. Um, and I wanted to just capture some of the key takeaways that I think might be helpful as you kind of think about approaching this with your organizations. Um, Training matters more than the tool. Like I said, we landed on Claude. There's a bunch of good tools out there, and they're all going to be better than nothing, right? Training is a huge investment. We had to invest in teaching staff how to communicate with AI effectively, how to evaluate, the responses they get back. And that's a skill. It really is. It's not something that comes automatically. Um, One thing that really surprised us, and it was makes me really optimistic about, I think, the impact for other organizations, is our flat org chart, our organizational structure, our limited resources, the high amount of individual ownership that our staff has to have because of these like resource constraints that we're working under. That turned out to be a huge advantage for us. So fewer handoffs means much faster, much cleaner AI integrations. A bigger organization with more staff and more siloing, that'd be a much more complicated process. And so the thing that was kind of holding us back and that forced us to look into this in the first place actually turned out to be a big part of what made it work so quickly and so effectively. Um, so that was really exciting. The part I'm obviously most excited about as the tech guy is how we've been building AI into our software platform itself. So about 2 years ago, I did a research project with Dr. Stanley Lim, who's a supply chain logistics researcher at Michigan State University. And after that initial project, we were kind of thinking about what we wanted to do next. And at some point, we sat down and asked, "What's a problem we have that's well defined, that we have good data on, and that AI could kind of help us solve?" And the answer to that was last minute volunteer cancellations. So when a volunteer cancels a pickup within 24 hours of the pickup window, creates a real operational problem for us. Site directors have to scramble to get that covered, or they have to cover it themselves. Food that was expected to move might not. And we have years of data on why this happens and when this happens. So over the last year and a half, we've worked with Dr. Stanley Lim to build a machine learning model from scratch to predict these cancellations. We evaluated, I think, 131 independent variables. We have 600,000 rescue records from the last 5 years that we were able to draw on to find these variables. And we also layered in some free third-party data too. So we have some census data in there. We have weather data integrated into the set. And all of those added kind of predictive signal that we wouldn't have had from our data capture alone. So the model does two things. It flags rescues that it predicts are at an elevated risk for a last minute cancellation. And then when the cancellation is confirmed, it then predicts which volunteers are going to be most likely to accept a substitution request on short notice. So the second piece is kind of what turns that signal into an intervention that can actually solve the problem. We've been piloting this tool across 17 of our sites since January. And right now we're predicting 1 in 5 last minute cancellations before they happen. And again, we do 12,000 rescues a month. So that's a shocking result, especially for this early in the project. It's predicted hundreds of rescues just in the last couple of weeks that would have gotten canceled, or the site director would have had to drop what they're working on and run out and do the pickup themselves. And hundreds of rescues, we were able to find that out days in advance and reassign it with no problem. So even at this stage, it's giving our site directors something they've never had before, which is advance warning and then an action that they can take. And so instead of being reactive, trying to scramble, we've improved that process quite a bit. So three things that I think are important takeaways of this project. Start with a problem you have good data on. Don't go looking for a use case and try to find the data to fit it. That's really tricky. And you can build a model that predicts something, but if you don't have the right data, you can do a great job on it and it's still not going to give you a very good result. So start there. And I think for us, it's part of the data capture process. So as we build features, we're trying to think about, what problems are we solving for the user? And this project really helped us add to that decision making. What data do we want? Like what data will help us answer these questions? and that we're building features that help us capture that as well. So quality and coverage matter more than scale. We had 600,000 really well structured kind of data objects over the last 5 years. That was plenty for us to get good answers to these questions. And the last thing is find the right partner. We don't have a data science team. We had a relationship with a researcher who was excited about the problem and who was motivated. And that was the difference between us being able to tackle this now versus several years in the future. So finding the right partner, unbelievably critical. And then the last thing I want to cover here is just building for the user. So everything I've described today, the AI tools, the prediction model, all that comes back to the same question: who are we building for, and what do they actually need? What we built is what you're looking at on the left of the screen here. So this is a screenshot of one page of a 13-page document that describes the model we built that lives behind the scenes. This is a taste of what I was trying to get up to speed on as we undertook this project. And that doesn't do anyone any good, right? Like that's the system, that's the piece that's doing all the heavy lifting. But what's important is what shows up for the users, and that's what we're looking at on the right of the screen here. An AI tool is really just a bunch of math, unless you can package it in a way where the end user can really easily understand how to use it, understand the value it creates for them, and they need to be able to trust it, right? So we could have had this model send the confirmations, we could have had it make the reassignments, but we know that wouldn't have worked for our network. We know the site directors are used to making those decisions themselves. And so that's kind of how we chose like this design to surface the interventions. So make sure you understand your users, make sure you understand, what the problem is that you're trying to solve. And then you got to make that case to your users, right? Like they're not going to use something just because it'll do the job. They got to understand how it's doing the job and how to use it effectively. So all this comes down to need. For our national team, the answer to that need question was capacity. 11 people can't do everything, but with the right tools and the right processes, we can do a lot more, right? And for our site directors, the answer was time. They need time. They need less time managing schedules, more time building relationships. For our volunteers, it was simplicity. They need an experience that's smooth and that they can come back to and keep engaging with us for a long time. And for the communities we serve, it's reliability. They need to know that food's going to show up when it's supposed to, where it's supposed to. Um, AI is a means to all of that, but it's not an end in and of itself. The technology can only create value if it makes those experiences better for the humans on the other side of it. So that's the story of kind of our journey with AI, the tools we've built and how we've integrated into the process. And I hope some piece of that is valuable to you as you kind of undertake this with your own organizations. And I think we're going to do some Q&A, right?
Yes, we are. And yet, look at the emojis going up, hand clap. That was awesome. As you were talking, I was like, wow, the amount of food. I was in the food service industry, so I know about food safety and things like that. So there's so many other things that you have to worry about. There is a question in the chat from an attendee. What happens to the information in the system when an end beneficiary, like a food recipient, receives the food and has been identified as a client or beneficiary? Does that question make sense to you?
I think so. I think so. Obviously, guardrails around how we're using data is incredibly important. That was another reason this particular question, like research question, was fascinating to us, is that primarily the data we used is already data that we collect from the users and that we have their permission to collect. And so we didn't have to add a bunch of guardrails for this. What we did do is in the probability kind of assignment process, we updated the part of our system that sends data to the model. We de-identified any data that gets sent to the model. So it doesn't have people's names, it doesn't have people's contact information. It has kind of a random string of numbers and letters that represent, a unique user. But the system doesn't have any additional awareness of like who that person is and what their personal information is. So yeah, and I think that's something that we'll have to do way more of that and build those systems out as we continue to integrate AI in other ways. We started here particularly because we needed to kind of get our feet wet here, and we needed to start with a data set that we already have access to. We already have the protections built in around. I hope that's the question that was being asked, but that's what it felt like.
Yeah, that was a great answer though. And John said, excuse me, was your app an API integration with Claude and is it an agentic oriented tool?
So this actually isn't. We very much did this the hard way. So we built this model from scratch. We used a code package called Light GBM for that, and then we hosted the infrastructure in our Amazon cloud infrastructure. So that is the hard way. I would say for most organizations, you're going to have a for most problems, you're going to be able to integrate an existing tool and plug it in. That does create some more concerns as far as how the data is handled, and there's some costs associated with that as well that we were able to avoid by doing this ourselves. But yeah, we built this from scratch and hosted it ourselves.
Wonderful. So I have a person who's asking a lot of questions, and I just asked them if they would like to come live because I think some of these questions need to be asked, verbally. Because when it's like a long question and you want to really get your question out so that the person that's answering really understands. So I'm gonna go to Mesa saying thank you for this amazing information. What factors went into determining Claude being your chosen platform versus another platform? I want to know that too.
Okay. So I'm not an AI salesman here. So this is going to be my opinions. Myself and the team we evaluated, we really liked the basic information privacy structure that Claude had built in. They've really put an emphasis on that we have not seen the same level of emphasis in the other tools that are out in the market. So that was a piece of it. They also are, I think, a little bit ahead of the curve in their co-work tools and their code tools. Um, I used a different AI assistant kind of platform for about 2 years before I switched to Claude. And that other platform, which I'm not going to name, you've probably heard of it, but it was very helpful. And there would be times when it would have no clue what I was talking about and give me a very well thought out, long winded, confident answer, anyways. Right? Like that tool had been set up to ensure that I was satisfied and felt like it was doing a good job, even when it didn't feel like it could do a good job. And Claude, something that's really unique to that platform, is that if you've not given it enough context to give you a good answer, it'll just tell you, I need the answers to these questions before I can really give you a good answer there. It'll say, that's not something I can do. If you tell me this and this, then maybe I can get closer. So for us, especially since we don't have the bandwidth to really, to do a bunch of certification courses and make sure the whole department's trained up at the same level, we needed a tool that would, excuse me, come kind of out of the box with those protections and that level of carefulness in how it responds to us. So that was our choice. Like I said, I think in the presentation, all of these tools are great. All of them can do a lot of things and accomplish a lot of the benefits we talked about here. For us, Claude was the one that fit our organizational goals the best. Um, but yeah, that's kind of my very careful response to that question.
I'm so glad I had you come by yourself because there are so many questions in the chat, in the Q&A, excuse me. Here's something I want to ask you that somebody put here. Um, it's kind of a comment and then a question. We're trying to create a change management plan for our organization around integrating AI into our everyday work, but having a lot of pushback. And I'm interested in how your change management process has integrated these concerns into like the buy-in from employees and stakeholders. Very good question.
That is a great question, and it's a funny story actually. We on our development team we have daily stand-up meetings, and then every 2 weeks we call it the retrospective. And so the retrospective is the whole team gets on, we anonymously submit answers to questions that are like, how did the last 2 weeks of work go? What slowed you down? What went better than you expected? Just kind of basic like check-ins with how we're doing. And so we always have some questions there that turn into like discussions and whatnot. And I had a developer submit a question that said, I'm a little nervous about my job, basically. He said that he'd been reading articles about how good AI tools are getting at coding and things like that. And he was like, that's something I'm dealing with right now is just nervousness about, my career path now that there's a tool that is being sold as kind of just being able to replace me. And so that turned into this really great conversation where we talked about, we're all feeling that a little bit, I think, regardless of what our job is. And it really turned into a discussion of our organization is already, we've got a team of superstars who all manage kind of their own little section of the workflow. We all own that. And what we came out of that call was with what we came out of that with was a a plan to kind of lean in, right? Like we said, we're already doing a lot. This is like adding an employee that we're managing. And if we each were able to add an employee, that would be create massive value for the organization. So that's the first thing is that was kind of how that conversation was born. I will say the politics of kind of getting everyone on board, that can be a tricky process for people. I think that way of pitching it is the most effective though. It's do we want to hire more people for free essentially? And how do we integrate those new people, those agents into our existing workflows? That was kind of how we pitched it internally, and our department sort of acted as the pilot test of that. And then I'll say, kind of second part of your question, the difficult part was really the workflows, right? And especially I think at nonprofits, small budgets, small teams doing a lot of work, the workflows get messy. There's what we'd like it to be, and there's kind of what it needs to be in order to get everything done on time. And so that was part of the process is mapping workflows that maybe were different than our understanding of them until we dove into it, and also creating some processes where we maybe had an employee who was just kind of making it work, and we even didn't know exactly kind of what they had to do in order to accomplish that. So that was one of the trickiest parts of this was mapping and uncovering all of the workflows that exist. And then it was pretty simple after that, right? We said, okay, these are things that our AI assistant can do quite effectively. We're going to let each person decide kind of the order at which they want to try to migrate something into the AI tool. And because our department was sort of guinea pigging this a little bit, we weren't under, time constraints. We weren't under deadlines for this. So we really kind of guess and checked a little bit in terms of the order, in terms of the change management process. We kind of had our priorities and had what we thought was going to make the most sense. And then certain things worked, certain things didn't. And where we're at now is we have a pretty good mixture of certain things are AI goals that AI accomplishes, certain things that we still manage manually. But our output from the developer team is probably 50% higher right now.
Wow. You're answering a lot of questions that a lot of people have, and I'm gonna
Nice.
yeah, I have a yeah, because as you're going through, I was like, oh, he's answered that, he's answered that. I'm gonna pop Lashika's gonna pop a link in the chat. I would like you to say today, because some of these questions that you have or some of the problems that a lot of nonprofits have. And see, Joe, you are a little unique because your nonprofit is a lot bigger than some of our smaller nonprofits who are just starting out with AI or just like started 3 years ago. So you have a different perspective, and you guys are going to grow. For those of you in the background, you're going to grow. You're going to get big. You're going to be helping, 150 million people or serving 250 pounds. You got what, over 40,000 plus volunteers. That's amazing. So lots more questions here. If you don't mind, let's
Yeah,
go.
let's do it.
So someone said, has there been any instances where users reject AI recommendations, even when the recommendations prove correct? Like, how do you balance user trust with the desire to maximize efficiency?
Constantly, tons of them, all over the place. So like I said, we designed the tool really carefully. We thought about automating some more of it because our goal is to save time, right? So the more we automate things, theoretically, the more time we're going to save. And what we landed on was we're going to have AI find the troublesome rescues, create the warnings, and then we're going to give that to the site directors because they really own that operation. Because we operate in this kind of efficient decentralized model, our site managers, they have a lot of control over their operations, and it's one of our strong suits. It's why we're able to scale this in different communities. The food ecosystem is insanely complicated, and what's going on in Baltimore might be totally different than what's going on in Albuquerque. So we let our site directors really define their operations to a pretty large degree. We train them, we give them the best practices, but we let them evolve around. So that means that they're used to having a high degree of decision making, right, on how these situations get navigated. So because we built it this way, we were able to see and track, how many of the suggestions are getting taken and getting followed. We did kind of send some emails out saying, "Hey, we're trying to test this model, so please interact with them. If you don't agree, let us know, and that's feedback that we can put back into the model and make it better." So yeah, so that's really been part of it. We haven't gotten full buy-in, right? It's not 100%, but it's people are using it and they're making the tool better. And we made sure they understood that was the ask, right? We didn't say, here's this sort of black box that's going to solve all your problems and you don't need to do this anymore. We said, we're building something. The goal is to help make you better at your job. And the response to that was really good.
Beautiful. So you talked a lot about training. Someone asked, was the time and training commitment you and your team need? What was the time and like how many hours? Was it days? Was it months?
Yeah, yeah. So that's a good question. So the product department is 4 people, counting myself. And I would say we probably spent like altogether, we probably spent about 10 hours a week for a month, kind of getting the project structure built out, getting the context for each project built out. We wanted each person's kind of entry point into the AI tool to be unique. So if I've got a great, product advocacy specialist named Sheldon, when Sheldon gets in, I want his AI tool to be kind of custom fit to him, but I also want to make sure that his tool is aware of kind of what I'm working on. It's aware of what our developers are working on. So that was the tricky piece. And like I said, there was some guess and check involved. The setup process was straightforward once we started getting into it. I think there was some. We found that the people on our team who are naturally good communicators, they had a really good time. They had an easy time kind of figuring out how to get the most out of AI, right? Like AI works on the context you give it. So if you have a tough understanding or a limited understanding of a problem, or maybe aren't doing a good job of communicating that problem,
Mhm.
then the answers you're going to get back are not going to be very good. And
That's
so, yeah, so that was something we had to sit with. And I honestly, I had a little webinar for the team, and I just said, like, we got to make sure, if you're explaining to your 6th grader at home how to do something, you got to make sure you've got the basics covered. You got to make sure that you're explaining it to them and meeting them where they're at. You're not explaining it based on what you already have in your head. Um, and so that was really the training we did there. And then what I did beyond that kind of session was we checked in, and we kind of looked at for each person in the department, how'd they feel about the results they were getting. We would pull some chats and kind of look through. Um, I would say that part of it went pretty quickly. I think it's on the individual level. It takes someone who's not used to using a tool like this. You either go in and you're like, all right, this is taking me as much time to explain it as it is to just do it, or maybe you're going in and saying, I'm going to ask it to fix something for me, and it's just going to do that without me having to explain anything. So once we kind of got past that, it went pretty smoothly. But that was something that we definitely had to build in time for.
beautiful. So, Maynard Clark said, you repeatedly describe AI as a means rather than an end. In a sector built on human relationships, what do you think about the uniquely human qualities that AI can support but never replace?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's interesting to come at this from my career has been in software development, right? And so AI is very different, but the concept is kind of the same, right? People can do math, people can keep track of, customer relationships, but the software we build is a tool that does that perfectly and more efficiently, and it never really replaces people. I think there's a lot of the same concerns we have with the AI kind of boom that we're in right now. We had the same over the last 20 years with kind of the software boom and then the CRM kind of shift. And really what happens is what we're asking of our employees changes, right? And so what we see is that employees, their job becomes more and more focused on, do you have good communication skills? Can you look at a problem and see the on the ground version and then the 20,000 foot version of that problem? Um, so I think that's the key part there. It's different based on, what sector you're working in, what the job is, what your company's trying to do. Um, but ultimately, it is a tool, right? It's a software tool. It's a bunch of math sitting there, ready for you to use it. And and I think how we use it, what we ask it to do, and the context we give it, those are all things that are still as important as they've always have been, and will just get more important as well. So certain things, it's going to make them a lot easier, and it's going to automate those things. But the decision making process and the sort of idea process, those are all things that there's still a huge need for and are going to stay massively important.
Mm. So, someone asks, some of the AI tools have been in the news recently in security breaches. Has this been considered going down your AI path?
Yes, so absolutely. And I will say that played a role in the tool we ended up going with. Um, I will say, building a software in 2026, you've got, cloud hosting for your infrastructure, your compute capacity. You've got, your Sentry like logging tool. Like right now, software development is a game of integrating with 100 little microservices and paying for cloud compute, and ultimately those are all surfaces in which you can experience like a cybersecurity threat. That is why in the private software market right now, cybersecurity is I don't want to misspeak, but it's probably the most heavily invested in and fastest growing kind of sector of the software industry. So I will say it all comes with risks, right? And we use AWS for our cloud compute. AWS can have a security risk, right? And we use a little front end package for our pop-ups. Like that can be a surface where you can experience a cybersecurity threat.
Mhm.
So I think the important element of cybersecurity, AI or not, is understanding what you have that's sensitive and what you have that's valuable, and then doing whatever you can to protect there, and making sure you're staying up to speed on that. For nonprofits, that can be tricky, and even for-profit companies. I've worked with some startups, and cybersecurity is never something anyone wants to invest in until it's too late, right? You can't invest in cybersecurity once something's happened. So,
Right.
so that's a tricky issue. I think AI complicates that, but it doesn't really change the nature of that issue significantly.
Right. That's so true. We talked about that on a previous webinar. Cybersecurity is like insurance. We need car insurance, we need health insurance, we need life insurance. So you definitely need to have insurance. So this is a great question for Bob, and this probably will help a lot of small nonprofits. He said, thanks for the great work you do at Food Rescue. As you noted, starting with the good data and process is critical. You also have some great teammates to help. But in an org that needs to start their journey in a more modest set of circumstances, what thoughts do you have?
Yeah, yeah. I will say again, outside of AI, even as a product manager, right? And that's not a role that exists in every company that has a software and a software team. Product manager, my primary objective is creation of value, right? And so that's what is the product doing and for whom. Um, my data is part of my product, and so if we have AI, if we don't, your data is part of your product, and it's what helps make your operations team set up for success. It's in companies I've worked for, it's something that you actually sell to companies that need leads or that need to do research. So that's a really key component of the decision making that has to happen at the design level. And it never does perfectly. There's always like, we'd like to have a report on this. We got to go back and figure out how to capture that data. But I think it's something where the people who are designing a new feature, if they're thinking about before that feature gets built, what are we capturing about how the users are interacting with this feature? What do we want to know about how the feature is used? Building that in there is going to set you up for success in AI. And then I think that was something that, just from our experience, that was something we learned more about after the fact. right? We started with this research question, and then we started when you're designing that model, you kind of start from where, okay, well, if I was going to answer this question, what would I be looking at? What sort of data points would be relevant for me? And so we kind of started there. And anytime you start that process, you're going to find gaps. So I think that's the philosophy. I think to your specific question, if you have an in-house software, then in order for that software to function, there's going to be a lot of really rich data already being captured. And that's just necessary for app functionality, right? So if someone has a specific user role, then they see specific screens. Like that's all data that can be really helpful depending on what question you're trying to have the AI answer for you. So I'd say start with where you're at, and sometimes like a data inventory can be really helpful. And then let that guide your foray into the AI world. I think if you start with AI and maybe you're talking to a salesperson, and they're like, "Hey, I can do all this cool stuff for you," um, and then you're trying to go back and backfill that data, that can be really tricky. And you're going to get into a situation where you've got organizational pressure to spend a lot of money on an AI tool that's built on a really small data set that's maybe not like a good representative sample. So I'd say that's a part of the implementation process as well, is start with things you have good data coverage on and quality data, and then go from there.
Awesome. This is amazing. There's so many questions. I don't know if we're going to get to them all. This has been amazing. And no one wants to come live because there's putting questions in the chat. So, what is the best? I think you kind of answered this. What safeguards do you have in place to protect volunteer, donors, agency data when you use an AI system, and how you address concerns about algorithm biases in predicting volunteer behavior?
Yeah, yeah, that's a tricky one. And this is something that came up a lot internally as well. And I had to kind of sit down and think like, okay, how do we answer these questions? For data protections, it's all the standard stuff you already have to do when you have an app that collects user data, right? You have to have terms of use in place. You have to have data scoping agreements where you're making a deal with the user about what you're allowed to use their data for and what you're not. And then when you design the tool does not need to know who is who. They don't need to know anyone's phone number, right? All your sensitive data, the tool's not going to need to know that for most cases. What the tool needs to know is what are the relevant contextual data features, and then a unique identifier for this user or this company or this location. So I think that's the starting point, is making sure you're doing that. Um, can you repeat the question? There was an element I missed and I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
I know that's okay, and I moved to another question. So because we have a lot of questions,
Okay.
I want to.
Sorry.
That's okay. No, no, that's okay. I know you do have this, but I'm going to ask you: do you have an AI governance policy rolled out in your organization?
Yeah, and it's a sort of a pilot policy right now because that's how we're sort of dictating the usage of that in my department. So it's work in progress. But yeah, that's something that's straightforward. There's really good kind of templates and models out there already. And really the I would say the policy being perfect is much less important than having one and making sure everyone understands it. So that's the most important piece. We do have one. It's going to be a work in progress, and I think I don't know if it'll ever be this is the policy and it's done. I think we're always going to be kind of updating that and modifying it to make sure it's accurately describing what we're attempting to do. But yeah, I think that's kind of how I'd answer
Joe, you are the AI expert today because
that.
the
Oh
questions that
no.
are coming in, they are like really, they want to pick your brain. They want to know if you know the future, Joe, because somebody said if you had an additional $1 million dedicated solely to AI initiative, what would you do to build next? I mean,
Wow,
they want
wow.
to pick your brain, Joe.
Hey, that's the type of question I like. So yeah, I think for us, there's some really cool advancements happening right now in the private like supply chain logistics market. And I think, we're a nonprofit, we're using volunteers, we're sort of at the very sort of outer skirts of that industry. But I think it'd be really fascinating to start to look at how supply and demand works in our specific kind of corner of that supply chain. because I think that we have tons of data from tons of donors that have food surplus, and a lot of those donors have predictable food surplus. So certain events means they have a bunch of surplus. Sometimes, like certain times of year, means they have less that they're donating. So I think that there's an AI model that would that would allow us to be more predictive of when there's going to be pickups needed, and we could integrate that into the scheduling and routing process. Right now, the site directors kind of we give them data and we give them reports, but a lot of times they're kind of making judgments on the fly about that. So I think that'd be really intriguing. And on the supply side of that, agencies are dealing with kind of the same issues. Like sometimes they have a ton of people coming in. There's huge needs. We've had some situations recently with policy changes from this administration that have resulted in very different demands than we were predicting. And so we kind of had to scramble and get more volunteers in and all of that. So I think a model that helps us predict that supply and demand and then link the routing process a little bit more would be super fascinating. And it's technology that the private market is already putting, millions and millions of dollars into. I think if we had a million, we could do something pretty cool with that.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to put my email in the chat. I know a lot of people have to jump. I'm going to put my email in the chat if you would like to share your AI journey and do a demonstration on how you're using it. And I would love to see you at the State of the Nonprofit Community Conference that's coming up that I will be hosting. Joe, there's still questions here. We have 10 minutes left. I'm going to try to pick a good one. Let me see. Let's see. But before I pick one, Joe, I want to know, has AI made a difference in your journey? And I know the answer is yes, but like how far along do you think you personally have gotten with AI? Because I know you're not just doing it for your nonprofit. You're probably helping other people. Yeah. Or what difference has it made, yeah, for you?
Yeah, I'll say so. I've been using an AI tool in some capacity for the last 3 years. So I've been using it. I was probably an early adopter. I think for me, because my role is I'll have to get on a call with people who are selling a product. So I'm meeting with salespeople and kind of hearing that. I got to jump into the next call with a bunch of developers who have their own language they're speaking. They've got their own set of problems. And my job has always been to kind of merge what we're seeing in the field with what's going on the developer side. I've got to have a deep understanding of how the client's business works, how our business works, and how the code is working, like the database infrastructure and all of that. And so my job has always demanded that I be fluent in these different languages and in these different kind of sets of information. And so for me, the AI tool helps me kind of catalog that. It helps me learn really quickly. So right now we're releasing an Android version of our mobile app, right? So that's a new platform for us. It's a new code language. There's a certification process that they have to go through. There's also a code process that's totally different than and a deployment process that's totally different than what we've been learning. So I'm the one scoping all that out and designing that and kind of building the tickets that the developers are actually using. And so my time to be able to do that went from, it could have been months to maybe days in some cases. So I use it extensively for research, for getting up to speed with things, and for kind of logging. We might have a customer report something, we do some discovery and come up with a concept, and then it might be 6 months before we have room in the roadmap to kind of fit that in. And so I've got to go back and kind of, reread emails, reread Slack chains, read the tickets, and kind of see what we have and try to. So that's another process where with Claude, I can click a button and kind of get refreshed on where I left that, and then pick up and start working from there. So it's made a massive difference, massive difference.
Awesome. I want to answer before we go, Dan and Pat. Dan, he it's a small nonprofit. You've been using some language that they don't understand, and I totally get it. This is what Dan said. You're using a lot of technical language, and everybody's at different, different spaces. We know this is why AI Impact Hour. They have a small team of three. So Dan wanted to know how to get started when you have limited expertise. So Dan, I put a link in the chat. I would highly recommend that you become a part of TechSoup Plus. You can get one-on-one assistance. There are so many other resources on TechSoup and we have a lot of other webinars too for people who are new nonprofit. They're on TechSoup's YouTube channel. And then Pat said, this is the first time joining. Thank you. Welcome, Pat. And these are being recorded. You want to know if these are being recorded. And you wanted to know you have somebody that's working on something similar to Joe, what Joe is doing. So we're going to put Joe's information. He's also going to put it in the chat. We're also going to send it to you on the replay. When you go to the webinar replay, we send the email. We'll send that out to you. So thank you so much. Again, we're going to put a link in there. I would love to see you all at the State of the Nonprofit Community. A lot of people are saying this has been an amazing presentation. I agree. Lots of things. Oh, good. You're putting it. This is what I love, that people are reaching out to each other and sharing their information. So thank you, Carolyn, for putting it in there. She's already reached out to you on LinkedIn, Joe. That's another way to
I'll
reach
look for
out
it.
to Joe. Yes. And that's what happens. People build relationships in our webinars and they, just leave with just contacts, ideas, resources, and connections. So thank you so much. What a great presentation. Lots of hearts going up. Joe, I want to thank you for your time because you are a busy man and you set aside this time to spend with us to share your expertise. And you went beyond that. I mean, you shared your heart. So I'm looking forward to seeing you again, possibly at some
Yeah, yeah.
live events. So that would be amazing. I'm definitely going to stay in touch with you. Thank you again for being here. Thank you all for being here. Joe, do you want to close us out with any final words for everybody for this AI space?
Yeah, a lot of words from me today, so I'll keep it brief. I will say, and I'm going to sneak in an answer to Dan's question. One of the best ways to learn about AI is to get on a tool, get on the free version, and ask it. That's honestly how we learned initially. We got on and said, "Hey, this is what we're trying to do. This is the organization. What do you need to know from us to kind of help us get that done?" So I'd say do that. They all have free versions. Claude has a nonprofit program where you can get a pro license for $8 a person. So that's a cheap entry fee. Get in there and see if it's going to do what you need to do. And yeah, I think it'll help you out.
Amazing. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Great to
Okay.
be here.
Bye bye.